Menka Doshi is here with us. Menka, you spoke to a bunch of legal veterans. Apart from the fact that this is unprecedented, what comes out? Because I'm sure the Chief Justice will now be under pressure to either defend himself or put out a counter view.
Look, and I say these as editorial comments, and I'll distinguish from what Arpan was doing, which is reporting. I don't think the Supreme Court will remain the same ever. I think today's day is a watershed of sorts. I don't know if it's a good one or a bad one. We've had different guests come on and describe it differently. Arvind Dattar, a senior counsel of the Supreme Court, said that, this was not just unprecedented, but it was also worrying the way these events have taken place. And whilst everybody understands that these four judges would not have gone to the public unless their backs were up against the wall, the fact that they've chosen to take this to the public, the fact that things have gotten so bad and deteriorated so much at the Supreme Court, that judges have broken that one, sort of code they have of deep silence, is an issue of very, very serious concern. Indira Jaisingh, another senior lawyer who's practiced at the Supreme Court for decades now, said she in fact felt encouraged that this was a move towards transparency, that the nation should get a better view of what was going on in the Supreme Court when it comes to the matter of allocation of cases, etc. Prashant Bhushan joined us, and he has been, at the middle of some of these cases that have helped raise these questions about allocation of matters in the Supreme Court. And he said that this is going to have serious implications on the future of this present Chief Justice of India, Dipak Misra. And when I pushed him to try and respond to that, he said, and he put out a very extreme point there, and I'm not sure everybody agrees with him, but he said that this might even lead to impeachment of sorts. So I don't know, that might be very, very extreme, but I think the point to make today is that the Supreme Court will never be the same again. When you have someone break a decades-old tradition and go public with concerns of this matter, you open up the court to one of two things. Either the remainder of the judges, and there are several very good judges in the Supreme Court, will come together, convince the Chief Justice of India, and find a way to bring back the unity that the Supreme Court of India has had. Or you will have all kinds of people wanting to take advantage of this weakness that is on display. And I think the second one is very, very worrying. So I don't know which way it will go. Arvind Dattar mentioned that, maybe the Chief Justice of India will now think that he needs to put his views out there. It seems to be a logical next step to this. But all this airing of dirty laundry in public never ever leads to good conclusions. We know that. We've followed this in the press for decades. Yeah. It weakens institutions, at least at the first instance, rather than strengthens them. Maybe this will bring about a strengthening of the institution. The second point I'll make, and I'll make it very briefly so you can get back to the business at hand, which is that there are two issues that have been raised here, which the viewers need to know about. What these four judges are agitating about has to do with the allocation of cases, and the allegations are here, and I use the word allegations loosely, that the Chief Justice of India has been allocating cases to benches in a manner which is not ordinary. So while some cases should have gone to the second or third most senior benches, they've been suddenly allocated to judges who are neither the second nor the third most senior. In cases where the Chief Justice himself should not have even begun to hear the case, he has decided that he's going to hear it and then decide which bench will thereafter take it up. So that's the one critical criticism that's come in at this point. And the second has to do with the lack of finalization of the memorandum of procedure. The memorandum of procedure has to do with how judges will be appointed to the senior judiciary, which is the High Courts and the Supreme Court. This was to be determined by the Supreme Court in consultation with the Government of India after the Supreme Court struck down the National Judicial Appointments Commission, or the NJAC. This has not yet been finalized, and these four judges seem to be agitating. So that seems to be the core of their letter and the core of their concerns. That's at the heart of this matter. But the way these events will be perceived will either lead to the strengthening of this institution or the weakening, and in the near term it might just mean the weakening.
I just have one question to ask before we move forward. In the whole NJAC versus collegium debate, one thought that the Supreme Court, in a sense, ganged together to some would argue, didn't want to push in any sort of new reform into it. The old boys wanted to stay together. But this shows a lot of division within their own ranks, isn't it?
So Justice Chelameshwar at that point as well had expressed his favor for the NJAC. I don't think the Supreme Court has necessarily been a gang of boys that agree or a gang of people that agree. There have been differences. Many judges have felt in the past that the collegium system has not succeeded in bringing the best talent to the fore in the Supreme Court, that it has not delivered everything that it ought to have. There are constitutional interpretations to this. But the fact is that so far the Supreme Court has spoken in one voice. Today we heard the Supreme Court speak in two voices. One of the four judges here, and I'm sure one will be of the remainder of the judges, if not the Chief Justice of India being the third voice. So yes, this I think plays into the hands of parliamentarians who questioned the way the Supreme Court was going about doing things and said there is no transparency, and who therefore used that to want to bring in an appointment of judges procedure that allowed for the executive to have a bigger hand in all of this, right? And I think the Supreme Court has just opened itself up now to further attacks from that front.
It's a divided house. We'll wait and watch. We'll get you more developments as and when they happen. But the word that's been used today is unprecedented. We've not seen anything of the sort from the Supreme Court, senior-most judges in the Supreme Court. Let's listen to some of those leading lawyers that Menaka has been speaking to after that historic press conference.
Not only unusual, it's unprecedented and also most unfortunate. I think that these 4 judges this must be just the last straw. Today's incident of not able to persuade the Chief Justice with regard to a particular bench must have been the last straw. So obviously, this has been brewing for quite some time. There seems to be enormous amount of discontent in the collegium. I think faced with complete frustration, they must have finally said that there is no option but to come to the press and say that, look, whatever we are saying to the Chief Justice is not being given credence to. So I think it's a very sad day. As a lawyer practicing for more than 30 years, it's a very sad thing to happen.
The point which they have brought out, that is history, tradition, as well as the independence of the judiciary and the administration, that is what we should really engage and find a way forward in the solution. We don't want this to escalate and grimmer. We want the institution to function in line with its legacy and constitutional values and the constitutional framework.
So I think we, the people of India, have a right to know what is going on within the collegium, and they have taken this very bold step of making it publicly known what's going on. As they said, they've done it in the interest of the independence of the judiciary, the need to preserve the institution and to maintain the healthy legacy of the court, which is one of protecting the citizens of the country.
All right, let's also get you some reactions from former Law Minister Ashwini Kumar and Supreme Court Advocate KTS Tulsi.
This is a sad day for our judicial system. It is a sad day for India's democracy. It is a sad day for everything that we have held dear. This press conference will strike at the root of institutional integrity of the higher judiciary. It has raised question marks about the credibility of the system as such, and has directly cast aspersions on the head of the Indian judiciary, namely the Chief Justice of India. I think the people of this country who have had the highest regard for the highest judiciary will now be forced to think aloud as to whether we have gone gravely wrong somewhere. And I think this calls for a very serious national debate. What will now be required to be done by the Chief Justice of India to restore the prestige and credibility of the judicial system is for him to decide.
Well, this is an unprecedented step. It's quite shocking. One never thought that the things will have to come to such a pass. But nevertheless, there must have been some compelling reasons for the senior-most judges to have adopted this course of action. I'm sure they exhausted all other possible remedies. And if they did, this is, one could see pain on their faces while they were speaking. And the whole matter is, with regard to judicial propriety, the question is of natural justice. जो आम आदमी के लिए, whatever is the law for the common man, it is applied much more rigorously so far as judges are concerned. Because the judge must always be above suspicion, like Caesar's wife. And the judge must not, the concerned person against whom there is an iota of suspicion, should not deal with it, the matter either administratively or judicially. So this is, if there was a matter before one bench, I personally believe that it should have been allowed to go ahead.